if there was an EMP attack on America, how would the military respond? How would the government respond? And that was exceptionally frightening to see how there was literally no plan at the military, no plan at the government, no civilian plan, no FEMA plan. There's absolutely no plan. If there's a national grid down event in this country, that 90% of the American people would be dead within a year, dead within a year, dead within a year, dead within a year.
Hello, friends. Thanks for joining me tonight on The Ryan Files. Tonight, we're exposing a great threat that most Americans don't even realize could bring our entire way of life to a halt. The power grid, the very backbone of modern civilization, is far more fragile than we've been led to believe. When it fails, whether through cyber attack, EMP, or physical sabotage, millions will not survive, and the experts know it. My guest is Jonathan Hollerman, Deputy Director of the U.S. Task Force on National and Homeland Security. Few people on Earth understand this danger more clearly, and tonight he's going to break it all down for us. Stay with me on this one, folks. This is one episode you cannot afford to ignore. This is The Ryan Files. Let's dive in. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me this week on The Ryan Files. We have an amazing guest. I'm very excited about this. His name is Jonathan Hollerman. He is the Deputy Director of the U.S. Task Force on National and Homeland Security, the President and CEO of Grid Down Consulting, a Senior Fellow at Impact America, member of the Electromagnetic Defense Task Force and Secure the Grid Coalition, former United States Air Force SERE Specialist, of course, Survival, Evasion, Resistance, Escape. He's an author. He's awesome, and he is here to talk about some really amazing things. Thanks for coming on, Jonathan.
Yeah, really happy to be here, Ryan. Thanks.
I'll tell you what, we're going to get into some stuff. You sent me your Grid Down Death of a Nation report, and I thought I knew a little bit about, what happens if the grid goes down, in ways that the grid could go down. But this really opened my eyes, not only to perhaps the ease of which that could happen, but also how quick it could go south, really, really bad, really quick. And so we're going to get into that today. Thank you for coming on. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and let's get into it.
Sure. So, coming from SERE as a survival, evasion, resistance, and escape instructor, I was always kind of prepared, a basic level of preparedness in daily life. And then I found out, I read a book called 1 Second After, and this was probably 15 years ago, around 2006. Oh my goodness, that's almost 20 years ago now, huh?
Right.
And that book it really shocked me. And that's about EMP, a nuclear EMP attack happening in America in this small town of Black Hills, I think it was. I can't remember, North Carolina, and how they survived after an EMP attack. And I'm an analytical guy, so that was kind of like, wait, what is this? I mean, people were starving, people were dying. And then I went out and I started researching it. And because of kind of my background, I wanted to know every single report from the government. I wanted to look at this every ways that I could on the threats of EMP and solar flares and essentially the vulnerability of our grid. And that led me down a road 20 years ago. I first started out writing fiction books on this subject. That opened the door to my Grid Down consulting business with helping high net worth clients buy property, build off-grid survival retreats. I wrote a couple books, one called Survival Theory 2, How to Survive the End of the World on a Budget. And those really kind of put me on the map. And then about 6 or 7 years ago, General Quast and Major Stuckenberg that headed up the Electromagnetic Defense Task Force, which is a joint services wargaming operation with all the alphabet agencies, the military and electric grids engineers and people like that. It's a wargaming operation that if there was an EMP attack on America, how would the military respond? How would the government respond? And that was exceptionally frightening to see how there was literally no plan at the military, no plan at the government, no civilian plan, no FEMA plan. There's absolutely no plan. If there's a national grid down event in this country, they have no plans to counteract that. And so if you read the Congressional EMP Commission report to Congress, they straight up say, and they've been telling them for over 20 years now, that 90% of the American people would be dead within a year. And when you say a phrase like that, people kind of roll their eyes and they're kind of like, oh, okay, that sounds sci-fi, that sounds crazy. And because of my background, SERE, having a lot of research in starvation, there's a whole row of books here behind me on different famines and the Holodomor and the Chinese famine, and it's just kind of a genre of mine. I basically was invited to be part of that wargaming operation, and then afterwards they asked me to write a white paper essentially for military training on what starvation looks like after the fact, how it would affect the troops. So that is what I give that away for free. It's 122 pages, and I think it's one of the most important documents people need to read on this topic.
Yeah, it's fascinating, man. And when you mentioned that number, Jonathan, 90%. You go in a room with 10 people and 9 of them aren't making it out. That is, I mean, that's off the rocker. And I don't, it's really easy for that number to just be so startling that it's like, oh, that can't be true. Somewhat like, the way before 9/11, we never thought there could be a 9/11. And then there was. And that's the thing that's so scary about this. I mean, it's not about fear. Okay. I'm not here to push fear,
Agreed.
but I am here to push like awareness. And, it's a pretty serious subject. And it's not like, we got to get this rare material from, somewhere that there's only 1 ounce of in the world. And you got to mix it with this other, no, it's like really, it's right here. It's right in front of us, and it could happen anytime.
Yeah, not just any time. It's kind of shocking that it hasn't happened at this point. So to kind of lay the groundwork of what we're even talking about, there's four to five-ish major threats to the American electric grid. First is a nuclear attack by an enemy nation. That is a nuclear weapon that's detonated high in the atmosphere, and it produces E1, E2, and E3, but the real damaging ones are E1 and E2, E3. And it produces these electromagnetic pulses that fry most modern electronics. Anything with a small silicon microchip in it, which is like your toaster today, that's everything, right? Your cars, all kinds of things. So that's from an enemy nation. The sun, the last major CME Carrington level solar flare that's hit Earth was in 1859, called the Carrington event. And if that event were to happen today, it would, again, it wouldn't produce the E1 side of it, but it would produce enough into our grid that anything plugged into the grid at that time, the electric grid would be fried. Anything that you had plugged into at the time would be fried. So you'd have the same result per se. And that the last one, like I said, was 1859. And if we look at ice cores and tree ring records and stuff like that, we know that these major solar flares happen about every 75 years, and we are long overdue. And we actually had one that just barely missed us here a few years back. So then the next threat would be physical attack on the electric grid. So you have the ability to attack substations and destroy them. And if you do that with enough of them simultaneously, you can take down the entire electric grid. The big one that I'd point out if you would want to do some research is called the Metcalf Power the substation attack. This happened, I want to say 2014. Don't quote me on that, but essentially some actors fired AK-47s at a substation. Before they went there, they went underground, they cut the fiber optics, cut the phone lines. This wasn't like a bunch of good old boys drinking some Pabst Blue Ribbon and then going out shooting something up. But it was planned, it was coordinated. They did not find a single fingerprint on any of the shells left behind, and we've never caught them. We have no idea who carried this out. They disappeared within a minute before the police showed up. So they were obviously listening to the police scanners as well. And the frightening thing about that is that was a dry run. And I'm not going to go into details, but basically their line of fire, they attacked the wrong part of the substation, and it slowly overheated, and that allowed time for them to reroute power around that substation. If they would have attacked a different part of that substation, uh, and it would have just went down quickly, the after report said Silicon Valley would have been without power for as long as a month.
Wow.
Now that would have been, no Facebook, no Google, none of that stuff would have been functioning. So that would have made front page news. But because they never caught them and it didn't happen, everyone's like, no big deal. The last one is cyber attack. So as of this point, uh, not as of this point. Back in 2014, Admiral Rogers, who's head of U.S. Cyber Command, had warned Congress as far as back as 11 years ago that the Russia, the Chinese, Iran has the fourth largest cyber army in the world. The North Koreans have a really powerful cyber army, but at least the Russians and Chinese, they are in our grid so deep. At any point in time, they can flick the switch on us. We can do it to them too. Mutually assured destruction stops this from happening. But it is well known in the cyber community, the military cyber community. We have briefings all the time. It is well known that they can shut us off anytime they want. They are so deeply embedded. So, and then that raises the question of artificial intelligence, right? So, on the as far as like latest threats over the last 8 years of the previous administration, there were, as depending on where you draw the line, but there were somewhere between 70 and 800,000 special interest aliens from countries that we know for a fact, we know 100% do not like America. And these are all military age men that came across the border. It would be unconscionably naive to assume that a lot of these enemy nations and enemy terrorist organizations don't have sleeper cells in this country waiting for marching orders. And, I don't want to get too long on my answers, but there are many ways you can take down the grid through physical attack. 5 or 10 guys could literally take down the American electric grid for months.
That's a crazy. Let's dive just a little bit deeper into a couple of these things too. And if you don't mind, just so the people out there can understand maybe the reality, and a lot of people don't know what an EMP is and whatnot. I just want people to wrap their head around the simplicity of how easily this could happen. When you're talking about the EMP, and there's a number of ways to do this. Obviously, the nuclear weapon detonation up in the air above the wave, the shock wave coming out is those EMP waves, those electromagnetic pulses, like you said, that fry electronic circuits, anything with a silicon chip in it. But when you're looking around the world, obviously the United States, Russia, China, Pakistan, Iran, these countries, India, have the nuclear power ability to do something like this. Obviously, you're right. Mutually assured destruction is something that comes into play, but there's also some of these smaller, where it doesn't have to be a nuclear weapon, smaller EMP machines, almost, you might say, that can be taken, and it could be a localized event near a substation, like you're saying, right?
Yeah, so that was what I was alluding to with the special interest aliens and sleeper cells. That's one thing we're tracking is there's a great book by our late predecessor at the EMP task force, Dr. Peter Pry. It's called Blackout Wars. I recommend everybody pick up that book and read it. That would fall under directed energy weapons, right? So you can produce a localized. One of the most famous ones is what's the one where they rob the casinos? The movie.
Oh yeah, yeah.
12.
Ocean's 11.
Ocean's 11. Yeah, Ocean's 11.
12,
So
13.
that's a good example of a localized directed energy weapon. So one thing that we're tracking is if you had 5 or 10 guys split up in pairs, and you can build those today. Well, not you, but somebody that knows what they're doing can build directed energy weapons, and they're actually a lot easier to get your hands on today than they were even 10 or 15 years ago. If you put that in a box truck and you drove up and down the East Coast, one out on the West Coast, up the coast of from Seattle down to LA, and the Texas grid. So there's 3 grids: West Coast, East Coast, and the Texas grid. If you put some guys in each one of those grids, and you had one of these things, and you just drove around just hitting substations, you just drive up, boom, drive up to the next one, boom, and you can map the most critical substations online with public information that's available on the internet. You could take down the entire electric grid. As few as 9 substations, if they were attacked in short order, would take down the entire American electric grid if you attack the right ones.
Yeah, and that's fascinating. And we'll get into in a second what happens if it goes down, which gets crazy, no doubt about it. The CME, the coronal mass ejections, so many times, especially today, Jonathan, everything gets political. It's got to be right or left. It's got to be, I'm a better person than you are. or whatever. This is not has nothing to do with that. This is our sun, you know, um, kind of just doing what it does, and it does it in cycles. And like you said, 75 years, every 75 years, you have one of these. I pay attention to it on a number of channels on YouTube just because I find it fascinating. The power of the sun is immense. It's unbelievable. But you know, a lot of people talk about these moments in time over the past, whatever, 20, 30, 40, 50 years where, oh my gosh, there was a aurora borealis in Mississippi. Well, if I'm not mistaken, just this past January, we were having all that stuff happening deep in the deep south as well. They kind of kept a little lid on that about what was going on. I know some of the feeds from some of the satellites, NOS and whatnot, had time taken out where you couldn't really see what happened. But there was basically a CME that happened. It didn't hit us direct, but it certainly put a little energy into the atmosphere, to say the least. And they say that over the next decade, like every decade, there's a 12% chance that one of these will hit our Earth. That, I mean, in your lifetime, therefore, it's going to happen. The probability says that's a big deal, right?
It is, and that was actually put out by NASA. There's actually a newer report that says it's likely double that at this point, especially with how long it's been since we've had the last one.
Yeah,
But like you said, the sun isn't political. It's going
yeah.
to burp one of these out in the right direction at some point in time. It is a matter of fact. It will happen. So, with that said, we work really closely with the guys over at NOAA's Space Weather Prediction Center, and they are they're really trying to increase the knowledge base on CMEs and solar storms and what the effects of it will be on the grid. They have a new satellite that they launched here, I think just last year, that gives them a little bit more time to know before CME hits. So that's good news. The problem is the electric utilities don't want to hear about it. So the electric utilities, how this works is when a large CME erupts off the sun, they see that and they immediately, they run some calculations, and with very short order, they have this picture of the red telephone on the president's desk. They pick up the red telephone, and all the electric utility engineers, people in the government, people that need to know, will basically pick up the other end, and they will advise them and say, "Hey, we just had a large CME burst on the sun. We'll get back to you, but we're just giving you a heads up, right? We don't have any measurements." And so it takes them somewhere between 8 to 15 hours to put all the measurements together. We do have some satellites that are really far out in space, including the new one that's recently been launched. Uh, but we're not. But the point is we're not going to know till very shortly before it hits what the polarity is, the intensity, or there's some certain things we're not going to know till it actually hits the satellites close to us, and that's not enough time to do anything. And I'll be honest with you, even if we did know, you can't just flip the switch on the electric grid. You can't just, turn it off. That's just not how it works. So it's going to hit regardless. The only thing we can do is protect the grid and harden the grid. And it's very, very unfortunate, but all of our enemies are working on this. All of our enemies have done this. Russia, China, they've if they're not mostly hardened, their critical infrastructure is at this point because they've been doing it for 10 years. We're the only country that has our head in the sand and we just kick the we've been doing it for 20 years. Both administrations. So again, this is not political. Both administrations have not fixed this problem. And it's not that incredibly expensive of a proposition. The latest figures I was seeing would be it would cost about $4 billion to harden the American electric grid. The we'll call it bulk transmission, not distribution, but bulk transmission against the E3 from a solar flare. I mean, 4 billion is a lot, but in the scheme of what our government's spending today, that's peanuts, right?
Right.
It wouldn't cost barely anything. But the electric utilities are pushing really hard against this. They don't want it to happen. And we can get into the structure and NERC and FERC and all the organizations involved and why these things haven't been fixed to this point. But yeah, it's frustrating from our end of it.
Yeah, so Jonathan, I just wanted to touch base before we get into that because that is something we got to talk about, man. We'll wait till we get there because it's like you said, it's very frustrating. The physical attacks, the sabotage. You're talking about that PG&E Metcalf substation attack. That's what you were talking about,
Yes.
and it's kind of crazy that we're talking about, and everybody's probably drove by one of these at some point in time in their life. And what do you see, man? Well, you got some chain link fence, and that's about it, right? I mean, anybody with a pair of wire snips could obviously get in there, and you don't even have to get in there really to do the damage unless you have a, a placement weapon. But I mean, obviously, a couple of AK-47s, and you can, if you know what you're doing, where to aim and whatnot, you can cause some issues. And I mean, maybe even that was a subtle warning because, like you said, it could have been worse. But there's really zero. Forget about hardening the grid for a second. There's really zero um, protection. Just keeping people out or away from this stuff, right?
So yes and no. So no, yes. The answer is just yes. That's one of our biggest frustrations. Those are called critical infrastructure
Right.
protection standards, SIP standards, right? So with the electric utilities, they get to write their own standards, and I guess this
Self-policing.
would be a good spot to explain NERC and FERC. Okay, so
Yes.
how it works with the utilities. The American electric grid is the only industry in America that has no federal oversight. So you can't buy a can of beans at the grocery store that the FDA hasn't looked at the factory that cans the beans. You don't you get on a plane because the FAA is inspecting planes. You can't buy a car without a seatbelt because there's government regulations. You have to sell cars with seatbelts. So anything that you can think of, the government regulates for safety of the American consumer. The American electric grid is the only industry where they have no authority to tell the electric utilities to do anything, which is crazy because it's the one industry, it's the one thing that every aspect of human life revolves around. All other 15 critical infrastructure in this country, from pipelines to fuel to food, they all rely on electricity. So how this works is you have two organizations. You have what's called FERC, which is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and they oversee NERC, which is the National Energy Reliability Corporation. Okay, so I know it sounds like a Sesame Seed skit, but FERC and NERC, right? So FERC oversees what NERC does, and they make recommendations all the time, but NERC can be like, okay or no. A perfect example of this is Project Aurora. You can go, eh, there was a secret test that was done on a substation where they were testing the SCADA equipment. The This was for cyber. The SCADA equipment hooked up to the substation. They literally they had the ability to blow up the backup generators that were hooked up to the substation just through cyber. And so this was a major vulnerability at basically all substations. So FERC told NERC, hey, this is a big problem. You need to fix this, right? And there was a video of it like actually blowing up out of the ground, this underground generator. So what happened is, and this was a long time, I think it was like 13 or 14 years ago, somebody filled out a FOIA request. I don't know, it was through the federal government or whatever, for a Project Aurora, and they were looking for some other Project Aurora, and the government released these classified details on this vulnerability of our electric grid, right? And it got released. I think a Washington Post reporter reported on the vulnerability. Anyway, so the FERC told NERC, "Hey, you need to fix this. This is a big deal. Do you want to have three guesses as to how many substations have been fixed to that problem today?
Hero.
Donut hole. That's exactly right. So they write their own critical infrastructure protection standards, and how it works is if they break, whether it be cyber or physical security, if they break their own standards, the enforcement mechanism is the person that breaks the standards has to turn themselves in to NERC. And then NERC sets the fines, and then they pay the fines into NERC, which is the lobbying coffer of the electric utilities. And just to throw this out there, the electric utilities have spent over $1 billion in lobbying just at the federal level in the last 10 years. They're the second largest lobbyists next to pharmaceuticals, big way more than big oil, more than any other industry. So it is a, to quote a good friend of mine, General Crosby, it's a self-licking ice cream cone. And we are no longer, as of the last 4 years, we are no longer to file FOIA requests through NERC to find out who's breaking the standards. And when NERC puts out their annual report of events, right? It's a fraction of what we could just find examples of in the news reports, right? So they basically write their own standards. So you were talking about physical security. The same thing is true. Most substations have not much more than a chain link fence, some barbed wire around the top, and some cameras. There was a major, so the church I used to attend back in Pittsburgh, there was one of the big substations for Pittsburgh right next to that church. And the parking lot was on a hill overlooking, I mean, you could literally walk right down into the substation from the church parking lot. So this is something, again, the EMP task force is trying to increase security, including drone security, including better perimeter fences that you can't see through to shoot through, right? Bermed berms, so you can't shoot through the berms. There's things that we can do at these facilities that would increase security, but there's no desire by NERC or the electric utilities to do it, and they just not going to do it. And it all comes down to the American people. 99% of the American people are completely unaware of the things we're talking about here today. So there's nobody showing up at a town hall saying, hey, Congressman so and so, what about this problem? Why won't you fix it? Because it's not a common problem. Everybody just banks on the fact that someone somewhere in the government is looking over all this stuff and making sure things happen. And it is not by even a small measure.
And I'm a pretty much a small government guy. Don't get me wrong on this, but that makes zero sense that there's no regulation. No, I mean, self-policing in this kind of situation is not the answer at all. And these are basically privatized companies. Therefore, you're not gonna be able to, use FOIA requests to get information to find things out. Other than what the government actually knows. That's unbelievable. I don't even understand how we can live in a universe where that is what is going on. It seems as if it would be that's like tantamount to setting yourself up for failure almost. You know what I mean? And it seems like it's such
Yeah,
an obvious thing. Is it all about the
it's
money?
okay. So this is where it gets a little complicated. Yes and no. So every single politician, both sides of the aisle, take money from the electric utilities. Maybe not. I'm unaware of the last year or two. Somebody might come back and say, "Well, I didn't," but anybody that sits on any of these committees is definitely taking money for their political campaigns from the electric utilities. Like I said, they're very powerful lobbyists. So that's point one. Point two is the whole premise of my report, Grid Down Death of a Nation, the psychology and physiology of human desperation, starvation, living without rule of law. The idea that 90% of American people will die and how they die and how bad this looks. I mean, worse than Mad Max, right? A year after an event like this. The politicians just don't want to, they don't understand the threat because you have to sit there and say, well, what about the electric utility executives? I've met in a room with 30 high ranking electric utility execs. I've given briefings to them. They have families too. But at the end of the day, they don't understand their inaction, what it will cause. So going back to the politicians, is we've had many bills. The Shield Act going all the way back to Trent Franks. Man, that was probably 7 or 8 years ago. There's been at least a half a dozen bills to harden the grid, and they've none of them have made it out of committee. They never make it to attach to a bill or to the voting floor in Congress. So it gets defeated there, and it's frustrating. I mean, I personally, I talked to Scott Perry, Ted Cruz. Last summer, met with Mike Waltz. I mean, and that's just me. I mean, I have friends in this industry that have met with Trump and a lot of people, and there's a lot of people that understand this is a very serious threat, On the back end, though, it's kind of an overwhelming thing, right?
Sure.
The idea of 350 million Americans starving to death. Like, how do you stop that? And we can come back to that here in a bit, but that's one of the big issues is it's such a big thing. It's easier for the utilities, the politicians, and everybody just be like, nah, it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. And I just don't, that drives me nuts. I don't understand it because I mean, if a foreign entity will send 12 people over here for however many years to learn how to fly planes and then hijack 3, 4 planes and fly them into some buildings to kill what, 4,000 people, 3,000 something people on 9/11 through one of these other methods, they could take out the entire country. We would kill ourselves. So, Iran, another point, every enemy nation of ours first strike war doctrine for World War III is an EMP attack and cyber attack. It's called combined arms warfare. So physical, EMP, cyber, all at the same time. That's first strike war doctrine. We know this from Russia, China, Iran, North Korea. The Muslim nations, they consider this Sharia compliant because setting off a nuke up in space, they actually don't kill a single human being. They just take out all our electronics, and in their war doctrine it says that our arrogance and our reliance on the electricity is what kills us, not them. So that's another thing. And so a lot of people don't think this will ever happen because we're talking about a nuclear weapon, right?
Mhm.
Um, the problem is it's not considered nuclear war by any of these countries. It's considered cyber warfare because a nuclear weapon doesn't detonate down here on Earth. It detonates 300 kilometers up in the sky, up in the atmosphere. And so the other prevention side of that is the fact that if you detonate a nuclear weapon and dirty bomb in New York City, we're going to have people in white plastic suits the next day digging through the dirt, and we're going to know exactly where that uranium plutonium came from, exactly what country hit us. With an EMP, there's no way to do that. You can't prove who hit us because their delivery method is not going to be an intercontinental ballistic missile. It's going to be an atmospheric balloon. Hint, hint. We saw those here, right? You can launch a EMP attack with balloons. The most likely method of delivery is going to be a cargo container. And there's the thing called the Club K missile launcher if you from Russia, and it looks like a cargo container, and it holds a missile, nuclear weapon if you want. And basically, you can take these cargo containers, you can ship it over to an enemy nation, you can park it in a field, and it can sit there for like 30 years with nothing, with nobody touching it. An electronic signal, whenever they want to push that button, they can push the button, it opens up like a transformer, that missile fires off straight into the sky. We have no missile defenses to stop any of this stuff, right? You could do it from a cargo ship in the Gulf of Mexico. The Iran tested firing missiles off of a cargo container in the Caspian Sea here 4 or 5 years ago, and the media reported the rocket launched off and it went straight up in the air and it just blew up in the atmosphere. And all the media reported they were like, "Oh, this is silly. They didn't even hit their target. They don't know what they're doing." And we're like, "No." They tested they know exactly what it hit the target, it hit the sky. That's what they were trying to hit, right? To see if they could get it to altitude that they needed to, and they did. So that's the delivery mechanism, and we're just not going to be able to prove who hit us. So if something like this happens, it's not like we're going to go to the UN and be like, "Oh, we're going to make every enemy nation a glass," because we can't prove who did it. How do we retaliate if Putin goes, wasn't me, right?
Yeah.
China goes, wasn't us. Iran goes, "Oh, sorry about that. We don't know who did that." You can't just start nuking people, right? So that's the reason I think it's much more likely weapon to be used because they can claim they didn't do it. It doesn't technically kill anybody at that moment, other than some planes are going to fall out of the sky. But yeah, it's really frightening. It's just very frustrating that in all our meetings and all the times we've been to DC meeting with people, and they nod and they're, "Yeah, this is very concerning. We're very concerned about this," but nothing ever happens.
It's unbelievable. And the thing about it is, yeah, let's maybe step back and say, okay, we don't have that. That is a scary scenario. I'm sorry, but it is a scary scenario, and just how the ease of which it could happen. The technology's there, and our enemies have it. And who knows if it's here? Who knows? But it could be just placed right outside of our borders and still impact everything. So that's eye opening. But even on a smaller scale, let's say we were talking about the PG&E Metcalf substation. Let's say they
Mhm.
took out that substation. Okay, um, and Silicon Valley down for however long. No Facebook, no Google, whatever. Um, it takes a long time, a very long time, a unbelievably long time to replace these things. The transformers, um, what you're talking year and a half, two
Yeah,
years.
that's one of the most critical points, and it's something I should have probably mentioned earlier. America's Achilles heel is the high voltage transformer. So depending on where you draw the line on voltage, but there's about somewhere between 2 and 3,000 of those in America. On average, we replace about a dozen of those every year. They last a really long time, 40, 50 years. In ours, and these high voltage transformers, they come in the past, they've always come from Germany and South Korea, which are allies. So we don't even make them ourselves. And the current lead time for a high voltage transformer is upwards over 36 months at this point. It's
Wow.
3 years just for them to build it. And this isn't like an off the shelf thing. They have to be custom built for each location and the needs of that location. So it's not like you just have a bunch of spares sitting around getting rusty either. So we only replace about 12 a year. In an EMP or a solar flare, if it takes out a large majority of those, you're just not it you're not getting the first one for 3 years. You're just not getting them. So people think like, oh, if an EMP happens, a bunch of utility people and there's gonna be a bunch of people with hard hats running around fixing stuff. It's just you can't do it. So that's why it's so critical to protect the high voltage transformers in this country because they're just not something you can build. They weigh 400 tons. Even once they arrive at the port, in a lot of cases, it could take months to get it from port to the location. There's only a handful of these trailers. I forget it's like 182 wheels to spread the weight out. They're super long. They have to inspect bridges. They have to take down power lines across roads just to get these things to the location. So this isn't something that you're just going to fix overnight.
Absolutely. And the other thing with that, you said um, South Korea and Germany are the manufacturers, but it turns out, if I'm not mistaken, from your paper, your white paper, there's been a kind of an undercutting of the sales. China has undercut some of those, and some of these companies have said, yeah, we'll bring that in, and then come to find out back doors and whatnot in all this stuff.
So yeah, this goes back to up till roughly 2015, 2016. Almost all big transformers came from different foreign countries that were allies to us. About 10 years ago, the Chinese entered this market. There's a company called JSHP. Well, it's technically California company called DoubleTree Systems, but they're a subsidiary of JSHP, which is owned and operated by the PRC. And for years, they've been undercutting competitors in the U.S. market, selling transformers uh, to, to to install into our electric utilities. Luckily, no high voltage ones yet, but there's a lot of them. And in 2019, under Trump's previous administration, we confiscated one of these JSHP transformers at the port. Somebody noticed something didn't look right about this transformer, somebody that was in charge of taking it to install it. And we transported it to Sandia National Laboratory. And what we found out, like the full report's classified, but what they have public released, because I know there's more stuff to it, but what they publicly released is that these transformers from JSHP, they had the ability to remotely destroy them whenever they wanted.
Unbelievable.
And so Trump, shortly after that, signed an executive order saying, yeah, no more critical infrastructure transformers from China or other critical infrastructure parts for that matter. And he signed an executive order to prevent that. Biden's first day in office, he comes in and he gets rid of all Trump's executive orders. Now, our organization, some of the organizations had communication with the Biden administration. We were like, get rid of all of them, but this one is a no-brainer. We know for a fact they're building back doors in these transformers we're putting into our electric grid. But it didn't sway them, and they technically kept it stated, but they gutted it, right? They gutted the executive order. So that same company, DoubleTree Systems and JSHP, and so the guy that runs it in California is, again, they're a subsidiary of a communist-owned, PRC-owned and operated utility company. They're still selling transformers and we're still putting them in because they sell them at a discount compared to our allied competitors, and that's what they wanted to do. And it's just shocking to see exactly how many, and I forget the percentages, so I don't want to quote it, but I think it's like 20 or 30% of, I think, New York City and Las Vegas at this point are getting their power through these transformers. Yeah, so it's unbelievable. It's so jaw-droppingly obvious. Yeah, you don't buy critical infrastructure parts from an enemy nation, especially after you catch them red-handed building backdoors into them.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
know. Maybe I'm overanalyzing this.
gosh, you're just way over the top here. Yeah, let's maybe enter a little common sense, right? This is the point where I was going through your paper and I was just literally getting angry. Um, I'm required by law to conduct myself in a much better fashion, higher standard of ethics than what is going on here, and that just is unbelievable. We get to AI. Talk a lot about stuff like that. I do a lot of research into it. AI is, whether you like it or not, it is the future. It's the present, really. And it's technically been the past, but it is something that is inevitable in one way, shape, or form. It will have an impact on all of us, whether that's good or bad, we'll see. But there's a number of ways you can look at AI in this. Obviously, one of the biggest concerns about AI is, and why everybody has to keep on pushing forward, is because you can't let the enemy get ahead of you. And it will come eventually to AI generated viruses, whatever, worms, you name it. And it's going to take an AI to beat an AI. And so we just keep on elevating this and whatnot. Now we can get into the Terminator stuff. We can get into the, AI takes over and whatnot. And obviously if AI wanted to take over, they would they would take down the grid. But let's not get into science fiction for a second. Let's say that's a different conversation. The reality is that if there is a cyber way, especially if there's back doors, but even if there's not back doors, countries like China, Russia, Iran, Pakistan, India, even there's so many of them out there. They have the ability, and now with new AI tools and whatnot, to get in our systems and, like you said, even cause physical, destruction, cause something to blow up. Those are big concerns, obviously, and to what degree you can stop hackers is depending on how good your hackers are. But the thing that people probably don't realize, AI requires a massive amount of energy. Data centers are popping up everywhere in the world. And, obviously our current administration just talked about a number of them going into Pennsylvania and whatnot. These are massive, massive energy vacuums. You talk about the EVs, and obviously there's been a little bit of change over that, but charging EVs, electronic vehicles, massive drain on the system. cooling. You talk about, we're in the middle of the summer. Just the load on the grid because of air conditioning alone is massive. Um, these are all things that, you know, it has nothing to do with a bad actor. It has nothing to do with, coronal mass ejections or EMPs or anything like that. It's just our grid is getting taxed more and more and more, and it's only going to continue to increase. Tell me a little bit about that. I mean, because that's just use. And
Yeah. So it's getting the biggest threat is the smart grid aspect of it. See, before 75, 80 years ago, knob and tube and the grid didn't operate like it does today. Today, there are so many microchips throughout the electric grid that make it function, right? It's more and more and more and more susceptible to not just nuclear and solar flares, but also cyber. There is equipment called SCADA equipment, supervisory control acquisition data. I can't remember the full acronym right now, but basically, anytime you have a big machine at a factory, there's a little black box that's attached to it from Siemens or one of these country, and that little black box is a small computer that doesn't have Microsoft Windows or an operating system. It basically just tells this machine to do this, open the valve at this time, close the valve at this time, do this, do that. And they come in all shapes and sizes, the SCADA equipment, right? So SCADA equipment, there's a phenomenal guy named Joe Weiss. So if anybody's listening, go to his, I think it's called the Unfettered blog. He's the world-renowned expert on SCADA vulnerabilities. And this is another thing we've been screaming at. They put no cybersecurity into any of these SCADA computers. That Project Aurora that I was talking about, that was a piece of SCADA that was on that generator, and that what they did was they told that generator to basically go forward, reverse. And so, I mean, you just see this generator start bucking and bucking and shaking, smoking, and then it blows up, right? So, just through a little tiny black box on the side of a massive diesel generator, they were able to blow it up. Same is true with our electric grid. So, again, what the utilities are banking on is that nobody, all their cybersecurity is front facing, trying to keep people out of the network and out of their computer systems. We know they're terrible at it. So the big companies, PG&E, they probably have, I don't know, $30 million cyber budget, maybe more. I don't know. They have, but there's hundreds and hundreds of electric companies. There's little tiny co-ops in Georgia. They can't afford some big cyber enterprise to come in and secure their networks and secure their systems. So the point is they try and build a fence around the electric grid. The problem is if you get behind that fence, then it's not hard to do, and get into the system on somebody's keylogger or, and get their password or whatever. Now you're in. Now you can do whatever you want with all that SCADA equipment. So that's the point is there are Trojan horses. There are sleeping cyber stuff inside of our networks. Admiral Rogers talked about this, like I said, warned Congress in 2014. He told them, he goes, this is the one thing that keeps me up late at night. And he warned Congress, and they were like, well, are you talking about 20 years from now? He's like, no, I believe it'll happen before the end of my term. He's been gone a long time from that position. That was a long time ago. I have that video of that on my website, him saying this. And so we've done nothing. We know they have Trojan horse just waiting to be detonated, so to speak, and destroy our grid. So that's really concerning. So I think a good thing to mention here is a lot of people are going to ask, well, why hasn't this? Well, if they have the ability to do it today, why don't they do it? Well, because we buy everybody else's stuff. The whole world economy relies on the richest country in the world buying everything, all of our stuff. If America ceases to exist overnight and our buying power gets taken off the global economy, the whole global economy burns down. I mean, you're going to have starving people in China too, because every one of their 90% of their factories are going to be empty, right? So Russia, China, and not to get into the whole Ukraine conflict and pushing Russia into the arms of China, and we're watching the Axis and Allied powers being built today. So it's not to get in the weeds there, but we've got a big problem because as of right now, they're not going to do that, right? But if things escalate to a certain level, I'm not going to get into tariffs, but if China goes after Taiwan here at some point and we step in, I don't think they'll do it on day one. I mean, but they have the ability. If China start looking like they're going to start losing World War III, I don't doubt for 1 second he's going to reach over and press that button. Same with Putin. Same with North Korea, Iran. Yeah, so it is a very serious threat, and I would also everything I've been saying, for the most part, is fact. My tinfoil hat side. So my assertion is I think that's why a lot of things don't pan out a lot of times is because they have that over our head, right? There's certain things that we're trying to accomplish internationally or this or that. I think that kind of holds things in check, right? So it could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. We have the ability to take down their grid, do the same thing to them through cyber. I'm sure we do. But it's it's one of those things we're in peacetime. This is gray zone warfare. But if things escalate to a certain level, I don't doubt for a second they'll press that button.
That's a it's a scary thought, to say the least. Scary thought. Wow. Let me ask you a couple more questions here. You know, we I was talking about some of these. I think Pennsylvania was the one I was listening to. I forget. Um, Reading some news articles, but a lot of these data centers that are coming in are literally saying we're not going to tie in to the grid. We're going to create our own energy production and whatnot because it is a massive drain. Um, I would almost guarantee that their uh, energy production is going to be hardened to some degree or another, um, which is very
You'd be
interesting.
shocked. I don't think they will, but that's actually a subject I can't talk about the data centers. There's stuff going on with that. I can't talk about that.
Totally understood. Totally understood. Let me ask you this: in a world where the listen, let's say something happens. Let's just say it's a CME. Okay, so we're not pointing a finger at anyone. It's just Mother Nature. Happens. Um, what is what should people be doing? I mean, I feel that people who talk about being prepared sometimes get a bad rap. Sometimes they get oh, you're crazy, dude. Nothing's going to happen. But I don't think there's anything wrong with just being prepared. When you're talking about 12% odds that you said might be doubled every decade of a CME, well, maybe just be prepared. Listen, if what happens if the power's off for 3 days? How can I handle that? Well, yeah. What if it's 2 weeks? Oh, yeah. I probably okay. What if it's 3 months? And then you start thinking about, okay, maybe I need to think about this. Maybe I need a little bit of preparation. What would your advice be to people just in a common sense way of going about this?
Okay, so let's talk about percentages since we're throwing percentages out. And these are best guesses by some of the government agencies and the experts, right? So
Sure.
you mentioned 12% per decade. It's probably more than that, but it's a CME hitting Earth. Okay. So people can say, like, well, that's a low probability event. Okay. Then we talk about EMP. Well, that's a low probability event. All right. What about physical attacks? We've got a ton of sleeper cells in this country at this point. Well, that's a low probability event. Well, what about cyber? We know they're in there. Well, that's a low probability event. What about AI? Low probability event. Quantum computing, low probability event. You start adding up all these low probability events, the number gets significantly higher,
Yeah.
right? And so let's just take the 12%. 12% per decade, a chance a CME is going to hit your house or is going to hit the earth. How many people have fire insurance on your home?
Yeah.
I could probably make the case it's less than 12% per decade that your house is going to catch on fire. What about dental insurance? Can pretty much guarantee you, right? You start going down people, I mean, people buy insurances on their electronics. They buy insurance on this, they buy insurance on that. If you were at car insurance, I mean, you go down the list. If you actually pay attention, you probably own 10 different insurance policies of some form or fashion, the average person. And if you don't do that, you're an irresponsible adult. That's crazy. You don't have insurance on this hunk of metal? That's you're so irresponsible, sir, ma'am, right? But we just talked about probabilities of a massive type event that would change your life a whole lot more than your laptop breaking or your car breaking down, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But people think it's ludicrous and nuts to have some long-term food stored up. More important than that is have a escape plan, especially if you live in suburban area, which 70 plus percent of the country live in um, cities over 1 million people. So what should we do, right? How should you look at this? What I don't want anybody watching your show to do is to run out tomorrow, cash in your kid's college fund,
Yeah.
and then jump on and buy My Patriot Supply. The first step of preparedness is first understanding the threat that you're facing, coming up with a plan of action, and then working towards achieving a goal. That's how you do this. You don't operate preparedness in fear. But to say there should be no fear involved is not true either. You should be very concerned about the things we're talking about today. You should be thinking about, okay, so if this does happen, what would I do? Right? And if you have no plans in place, you're probably going to make a decision that's going to get you and your family killed. I'm just going to say that up front. So, first, understanding the threat. What does it look like? And we really didn't get into that because the threat isn't the fact that your tablet doesn't work and the lights won't come on in your house. Every aspect of human life revolves a lot around electricity. Everything that's in your office around you right now, Ryan, everything you see in my office arrived on a truck at a store that I bought it from, or it arrived by, well, lately, a lot of them come from an Amazon truck. But everything is interstate shipping. Okay. You lose the electric grid, you have no gas pumps, interstate trucking stops. Today you buy a can of beans at the grocery store, you swipe that can of beans, there's an electronic signal that goes from that cash register to the distribution center for that grocery store. Put another can of beans on the next truck. From that distribution store, there's another signal that goes from there to the canning facility. Oh, we know one more can of beans on the next truck. From the canning facility to the farm where the beans are grown. There's trillions upon trillions of electronic signals flying around all day long, every single day, that keep the food in your grocery stores. So what you have to understand is the number one threat in this scenario is food. Depending on where you draw the line, there's kind of only like 9 days worth of food in the distribution grocery store system at any given point in time. Just in time delivery. Everything just kind of shows up right where it needs to be, right when it needs to get there. You take out the electric grid, no interstate trucking, no way to move things around, no way to know where to take stuff. When your grocery store is empty, it is never getting resupplied. I'll give you another little fun fact that goes along with this. 99% of the United States military bases in this country get their electricity from the civilian electric grid.
Yeah.
All the food on the military base at your BX comes on a truck with that same electronic system, just like everybody else. There is no, they have up to 48 hours of backup diesel, even if things are even functioning. They get, a lot of them get their water from a nearby city. They get their power from they're in the same boat as everybody else. All these post-apocalyptic movies where there's these trucks rolling down the road and they're passing out MREs, never going to happen. I've sat in the military. I mean, there was metal detectors and scanning devices. You couldn't take your phone into this event. I've sat in the wargaming for this. There is no government plan. There is no military plan. No one's coming to help you, feed you, protect you, take care of you. Within 3 or 4 days after an event like this, the police, the radios don't work, gridlock traffic in the cities, the jails don't work, the court system isn't working, nobody's showing up to do anything by day 2 or 3. I mean, if you arrest somebody, is it even, can you even open the jail doors without electricity? I don't know, right? You can't feed them. There's no water in the jail. There's no septic. Everything stops functioning. Society stops. It's a continental time machine. And we just don't have the society to live without electricity. We just don't. And people will tell me, well, I know how to garden. Yeah, but do you have 1,000 candy jars? Do you understand how to pressure cook stuff? Do you have a root cellar to store your gardening? Do you know how much you need to grow to feed yourself to get through to the next harvest season? A can of beans from the store only has 60 calories in it. You don't understand people just don't understand. They're like, well, I'm going to garden. I'm going to go live off the national forest like the Legend of Mick Dodge. Like, there's not going to be 2,000 other people in that same little patch of woods with the same crazy idea as you, with a rifle behind every tree, and everyone's starving to death. Yeah, it's a real great scenario, right? So I'm painting an ugly picture here. It will get ugly. Starvation again. Read Red Famine. Read the Chinese Famine. Read the Holodomor. Read stories about historical times of starvation where there was a population of people that had life skills that we only dream about. They understood what they could eat out of the wild, and it still ended up within a year of people eating their kids. And I'm not saying that for shock value. It's a fact. So you need to have a plan on what to do. So the biggest things, you can figure out a roof over your head. You can figure out water, boiling it, getting it from a stream. These are easy things to conquer. The two big things, the two biggest threats to your life in a nationwide long-term grid down event is going to be lack of food and other people.
Yeah.
The zombie apocalypse. So you need the most important things that you have to have figured is have a long term, a year's worth of calories stocked up somewhere, not in the city. That's the thing that drives me bonkers is all these people want to stay in the city. The least amount of human interaction you can have for that first year. If you have an Uncle Bob that has a farm down a dead end dirt road, try and ride it out there. But if you try and ride it out in the city with a million other starving, and again, read my report, understand the psychology behind starvation psychosis. People don't think clearly. People are going to be killing each other over the last can of peaches. So you need to have a plan to evacuate, a plan to go, food when you get there, and just kind of keep your head down, at least for the first year before you start looking at bartering or joining other groups.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What about uh, listen, everybody is responsible for themselves. We live in a world where, the government wants to be, your daddy or whatnot, take care of everything. But at the end of the day, when the chips are on the table, you are responsible for you. What's your thoughts at least on, Faraday bags, Faraday cage stuff, as far as, you know, electronics in your house, possible solar panels or anything like that, to maybe it's just to help you be able to cook food or whatnot, or boil water. But what's your thoughts on that?
Sure. Okay, so first of all, Faraday bags, they're typically not much more than electric static bags that electronics get shipped with in the mail. Most of the companies that make them don't have any test data to even prove what they're trying to claim that it does. If you get nothing else from this is what I can assure you: 99.59, and that's a precise estimate, of the information you're going to get on EMP protection on the internet, on YouTube, is incorrect. It is false.
Wow.
Uh, Even in the commercial realm, one of the number one bullet point after the EDTF, the Electromagnetic Defense Task Force, the number one bullet point, I think it was number one, was that the military needs to declassify the standards or the test data from the Kazakhstan Russian. We basically know what their EMP weapons are capable of, and the electric utility companies don't know. They have no idea because it's so highly classified, and that was one of the main findings. So what happens is you have what's called Mill Standard 188-125. That's on the internet. That standard, I've met the engineer that was involved with the original algorithms that helped write that paper. Was written in 1981. And that was based off Starfish Prime. That was based on some of our nuclear tests that we had done. And it was based off an off the shelf nuclear war, detonating just a regular old nuclear bomb up in the atmosphere. And that's what that test data and that protection standard was based off of. In 2004, the Russians were meeting with Roscoe Bartlett and some security guys after the fall of Russia. Some of their counterparts in the agencies were meeting, and again, this is public knowledge, and they basically warned us because they were talking about nuclear war, and nobody wants that. And they basically said, "Yeah, we have developed super EMP technology that can wipe out even your most hardened nuclear triad and your bases, right? Even your the biggest hardening standards." So we ended up finding out that they had developed what are called super EMP weapons that are actually much smaller, but they produce a heck of a lot more gamma radiation, and it's kind of like a shape charge where it shoots it straight back down to Earth, so it's not going in all different directions, right? So now instead of 50 kilovolts per meter, it's as high as 200 kilovolts per meter that you have to protect from,
Wow.
or volts per kilometer, or whatever you want to call it. Uh, so everyone is like, oh, we're protecting to military standards, but that was from 1981. You don't understand the the stuff that enemies have developed, the latest technology, and that's like literally trying to, I don't know, a good analogy, protect from some, like, oh my goodness, it's an F-16. It's like, well, we got F-35s now. It's not the same baseball game. So everyone's telling you how to protect against this thing. Half the time, they don't even have the test data even to prove that it protects against that. So to answer your question, even if I'm incorrect, so even if I'm not, but even if I'm incorrect in my assertion here, and there are companies that make, and the Faraday bags all work. That little plastic device you plug on your home, and somehow magically it's going to protect every silicon chip in your house from getting fried. Um, so let's say you do all that stuff. Let's say you have a backup generator. Everything's hardened and protected. Let's say you even stocked up on a year's worth of food. And this event happens. That generator kicks on. You still have water. You still have lights. You're cooking food, like you said, all those smells going out the window.
Big
You
target.
still have heat. You still have air conditioning. If you don't think the 10,000 people within walking distance of your one house that still got food and heat and electricity and all this other stuff, and you're still cooking food, even if you tried to hide it. I've seen the things, oh, spray paint your front door with an X so people think it's already been looted, blah, 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 blah. If you don't think your neighbors that are starving to death, that are psychotic at this point, 3 weeks in, 4 weeks in, aren't going to figure out that you're guarding behind your privacy fence, if you don't think they're going to if you don't think they're going to not notice that you're the only one whose belt hasn't gone in 4 notches and their skin isn't gray at this point, right? If you think they're not going to figure it out, I got oceanfront property in Arizona to sell you. So putting all this money into home base, I get it. It's your home, it's your castle. You feel secure there. That is a waste of money. Yeah, that stuff will, even if it does work, even if it does, yeah, sorry, it's going to be heating and cooking and feeding the local warlord, the guy with the biggest gun, the guy with the most team members that checked his, conscience at the gate at the beginning of this event. That's who you're feeding. It's not going to feed your family.
Hmm. Wow. Wow. That's a wow.
Sorry, I'm a ray of sunshine. This is why I do a lot of interviews once.
No, no, Jonathan, I appreciate it, man. Like, because why I'm saying wow like that is because you're telling the truth. And you're not trying to candy coat it and make it warm and fuzzy, because we're not talking about something that's warm and fuzzy, you know. Um,
That's my biggest frustration. Sorry to chime in here, but that's my biggest frustration with the YouTube prepper community
yeah,
is they have no background in any of this stuff. They've never sat in any of these meetings. They've never they're American preppers. They grew up in the richest country in the world, the most sane, with most laws. There's police, Yeah, oh, you work together with your neighbors. You're on a cul-de-sac with 20 homes. Work together. Whose food is that other 100 people eating? They're eating your food. That year's worth of food that you just had set up for your cul-de-sac, it runs out. Instead of a year, it's going to run out in 2 weeks. And you're in the same boat as the rest of those people. You're just, you've just delayed the inevitable by an extra 2 weeks for that group of people. It's still going to fall apart really fast. So have a plan to go somewhere to get out of that environment, the least human interaction you can have for the first year, and the ability to feed your loved ones, keep your head down and protect it. That's your best chance of surviving. And I'm sorry, and I know this goes contrary to all the other guys on the internet that have three or 400,000 viewers, and they're all regurgitating the same talking points and the same strategies that they jotted down on the inside of a empty pizza box after watching The Walking Dead. All these great ideas they have. Um, it does not supersede human psychology and the threats that you're going to face.
yeah, wow. Well, this has been fascinating, and eye opening. Why don't you tell the people in closing here? Is there any kind of ray of light, hope, or what can we do to maybe not have this be the inevitable future that it seems like it really could be?
There may be one single ray. We're working avenues with the current administration. We're trying to get them to act. There are people in the administration that are aware of this threat. I know of some things like that I mentioned. There's certain things I can't talk about. There's things that are happening behind the scenes. Um, but it's not going to do you any good. It's not going to do me any good. It's not going to do your neighbor any good. Okay. When I said that 99% of the military is reliant on the civilian electric grid, I'm serious. When I say that the military, the government, FEMA, there's zero action plan for a large scale grid down event. I'm serious. These are true statements. No one's coming to help you. You are on your own. So, in that aspect, I do not foresee, even though I'm the deputy director of the EMP task force and we're going to fight tooth and nail, we're going to fight to the last man to try and get this thing done. 20 years of bills and people talking about this, it hasn't happened yet. I'm not 100% optimistic that it's going to happen. But even if it did happen, even if we did get a hardened high voltage transformer in some of our power generation facilities, it's still not going to help you in the city. The distribution network's still fried. Every factory's fried. The gas stations are still fried. The interstate trucking is still not functioning. So even if we harden this stuff, we're hardening this stuff so we have the ability to come back at some semblance, right? That we can rebuild at some point. It's still going to be really bad, even with the hardened grid. So that's part of the reason why a lot of people, some of the higher ups, like kind of ignore this, is because even if we did spend a lot of money doing this, that 90% figure, right, goes down to 60% are still going to die, right? But 30% of the country, that's still 100 million people. Let's do it anyways. So we need to do this. This is the worst case scenario. This is the future warfare. This is where it's headed. You just need to be aware of it. Again, educate yourself on the threat, understand what's coming, make a plan, execute that plan, and have a plan to deal with other people, human interaction. Make sure you have food. You can figure out water, unless you're in Arizona. But if you're in Arizona, that's going to go back to desert. You might want to find another area to go to where there's water, right? So yeah.
Yeah. Man, how do people get a hold of you, your books, follow you, anything like that, so that they can dive deeper on their own into all this? And also the 122 page document you said you had for free, I believe it was. Tell people where they can get all of this.
Sure. So on my website, if you go to griddownconsulting.com and you go to the research tab, under the research tab, you'll see the grid down report. It's a 122 page PDF. You can download it for free. If you want to purchase it, all of my books, I've got 5 different books, 3 fiction books, 2 nonfiction, Survival Theory 2, How to Survive the End of the World on a Budget. You can purchase all my books on Amazon. Every one of my books is on Kindle or ebook, all the formats. They're all on Audible as well. That's something I do a lot, listen to a lot of audiobooks when I travel. So you can find them there. So griddownconsulting.com. The website for our organization is emptaskforce.us. If you have time and you'd like to volunteer, we're trying to build an army and we're trying to get the news out. If there's something that you can, volunteer time and help us out, contact us at the emptaskforce.us. We'd love to see what you can offer. And the last thing I'll say, Ryan, we talked about a lot of scary stuff today. We talked about the worst case scenario of something that could happen for our country. I would say there is always, regardless of what comes, there's always hope in Jesus Christ. And I would recommend everybody to put their faith and trust in him and to read their Bible and make sure your Bible is in your bug out bag.
Amen, brother. Amen. This has been fascinating, eye-opening, but I appreciate the words of hope and faith in the end. Thank you so much, man.
Thanks for having me on, Ryan.
Ladies and gentlemen, one and only Jonathan Hollerman. Thank you. You've just heard the truth from someone who's been on the inside, and the warning couldn't be clearer. Our grid is vulnerable, and when it goes down, everything goes with it. If this conversation opened your eyes, do me a favor. Don't just walk away. Help us get this message out. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. And share this episode with friends and family. They need to hear it. And if you believe in the work we're doing here, if you want to keep these conversations alive and uncensored, then please consider supporting the channel. You can do that right now at the links below, whether it's through direct support, becoming a channel member, Patreon, or grabbing some of the exclusive content we've built for our members. Every bit keeps us bringing you the truth that the mainstream outlets just won't touch. This is The Ryan Files, and you bless me. Thank you for watching. Be amazing, stay prepared, and as always, stay curious, my friends, and I'll see you next time right here on The Ryan Files.
Are you not curious?
Preparing to transfer the Ryan files. Now.
I present to you, with great intrigue and wonder, the Ryan Files.